Ephesians 5, verses 3 through 8. But fornication and all uncleanliness or covetousness, let it not be named among you, as it is fitting for saints. Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks. For this you know, that no fornicator, unclean person, nor covetous man, who is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore do not be partakers with them. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light.
Whoa, that thing is hot. I want to back down the lapel mic just a hair. There you go. Thank you. After that wonderful singing, after the tremendous gathering at the Lord's Supper, those first words just kind of strike out of nowhere in Ephesians chapter 5. But fornication, and starts talking about a list of sins. There's a phrase, and this is a lesson that I've mentioned to several folks that I've thought of many years. There's a phrase a lot of times that we hear, that we use, or that we've had individuals say. You might even hear somebody say this if they've gone on vacation. Kind of tongue-in-cheek, they'll say, "What happens at the beach?" or "What happens at Vegas?" or "What happens," and I'm not going to list some of the places, maybe some of y'all have been on vacation, so I might make you a little nervous. What is it? Stays at the beach. Stays at Vegas. Well, I'm gonna totally shatter that myth this morning. Because what happens, there's a logo that you're about to see. And this is the logo of the world. Just do it. Well, God says don't. Just do it. That is his whole warning in reference to sin. And when you consider the early church father, Ambrose, is the one that came up with the phrase, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do." Now, some of you immediately want to come to me and say, "Well, wait a minute. Paul said that when he was talking about if we're with those who are Gentile, to kind of be like them." There's one thing in developing maybe a cultural similarity or doing those things that are amenable or doable, as opposed to doing something that's wrong and trying to solve that up by saying, well, it's what they're doing. And it's this whole concept of what happens in Rome does not stay in Rome. God still knows about it. And it's that whole thought process here that he's kind of sharing with the Ephesians. He's talked to them all throughout this text. And as was read, "But fornication, all uncleanness or covetousness, let it not even be named among you, as is fitting for saints." Do you realize there are things that we're not supposed to do? But we live in a free world, right? We live in a nation celebrated the great sacrifices of many, even last weekend, as was mentioned by John, to give us the freedom to do whatever we want to do. And in this world, if you start making a suggestion, so, well, you shouldn't be doing that, then what's the initial response? That's none of your business. God says, it's my business. And he says that because he cares. He says that because he's the ultimate Father. And in this text, we're going to walk through four thoughts I'm going to kind of share with you that are in this text, I believe, that are very important. Number one, he says there are actions we must avoid. There are things that are wrong that will never not be wrong. Hope I said that correctly, using those negatives. Never not, that's right. There are things that are wrong that will always be wrong. And God says no matter what the time, no matter what the place, location doesn't change our attitude and our opportunities before God. He says there in Romans 12:1-2 kind of sums this up. It's a text you're very familiar with. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable unto the Lord, and be not conformed to this world. Maybe one of the signature differences that needs to happen within the family of God is that we need to look different than the world. We need to make different choices than the world makes. We need to decide. And this list, I'm not going to, at one point I thought about going through the list. And I am going to walk through it quickly that he gives here in Ephesians chapter 5. Fornication, which is sexual unfaithfulness, it's marital unfaithfulness, adultery, it's homosexuality, lesbianism, sexual lust, anything involved with us making a poor choice sexually, because God designed us as sexual beings and set apart a right place for that to be satisfied by one man, one woman in a relationship before God. That is the biblical model. And when you consider in our world just the rampant attitude of I can do whatever I want to with my body, and when you literally say, well, no, I can't. God's, because I've heard this phrase, you don't have the right to tell me what to do. You don't own me. Well, you can't say that to God. He does own me. Guess what? He owns you too. That's what that awesome, what we just talked about at the cross in that song sang about. He gave his life. The precious blood of the Lamb without spot. That gives him every right to tell us, no, you can't just do what you want to do. You can't just use your body any way you want to. You can't just live with anybody you want to live with. Outside of a relationship of marriage. In the covenantal relationship, God says, I want to join you as one man to one woman for one lifetime. That is his ultimate desire. I know we messed that up. And all sorts of just struggles and stresses come as a result of that. It's so obvious to me why in Malachi it says God hates divorce. Because it just has such a product of tension and struggle. So he says, so we make a commitment, and many times individuals, and the difficulty of that. And he talks then about uncleanness. One translation translates that word corruptness or rottenness. This don't sound good, right? Uncleanness in the first century, if you look at the Levitical code, wish we had time to look at it. God, when scientists have analyzed the Levitical code about cleanliness, the keeping things pure, none of the unclean things, and it's in the Levitical code, it is so accurate scientifically, biologically, of what not to do and how to stay away from getting ourselves contaminated. That's that whole concept. He talks then about covetousness. This one's getting low. That means wanting something that we shouldn't want. Basic way to put that, of greed and lust. And we live in a world that kind of produces filthiness. Another translation is obscenity, crudeness, that which is base or shameful. Filthiness. Do we talk about things? Do we listen to things? Do we involve ourselves in situations that are not good, that are in this category, and we'll kind of write it off and say, well, I know that's not good for me, and I know that's not right, but we'll be flippant. And he's even talking about language. When he talks here about foolish talking, coarse jesting, the word itself has this idea. One writer said it turns something innocent into something obscene. To associate with someone who is mentally deficient, to have a discussion of crude or coarse, off-color speech reveals that you lack the adequate vocabulary necessary to express yourself in a decent manner. We live in a culture sometimes that individuals that are able to express themselves in what's called colorful metaphors and expletives seem to impress individuals. That's never impressed me. And it sure doesn't impress God. If the words I'm saying are used to impress a person, I'm trying to impress the wrong individual. And you're going, man, Paul is being very explicit here about our character, our nature, of what we should do. These are things to avoid. But then he segues in a really neat way when he talks next about, but be thankful. So not only are there actions we must avoid, there's an attitude we must adopt. An attitude of gratitude. You know, there's another text there that I referenced looking at. 2 Corinthians 6:17. Don't flip that one up. Stay where you're at with the PowerPoint. Come out from among them and be ye separate is the challenge in Corinthians that he told of all the people that God could give that message to from Paul. He says this in the middle of one of the most immoral, abhorrent, decadent cultures that has ever existed on the face of the earth, and I don't say that lightly. Go ahead and come to me afterward. We'll do whatever historical search you want to do currently, geographically. I will guarantee you I can one-up you from Corinth. Let's go to Bill Street down in New Orleans. Nope. Corinth's got them beat. Now, I don't mean to pick on somebody. There are people here from New Orleans. I'm not picking on New Orleans. But everybody knows Bill Street, right? The thoughts, the decadence, the immorality. Some of you have seen that, I know, in daytime. Rome, Corinth, made them look innocent. That's why I'm totally convinced, and I want you to hear this very clearly. The book that was written 2,000 years ago to give a code of how to live has not changed. God still knows what He's talking about. And He's as current as your last breath. And the power of that, as he shares this, and then coming out of that, he says, be thankful. Hebrews 13:15 says, with the fruit of our lips, giving praise and honor to God, being grateful to God. Ephesians 5:20 in the same text and where we're at, it says, giving thanks always for all things to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, that catches me as a little strange, doesn't it you? Maybe not. I think, how in the world does he go from saying, look at, and I didn't go through all the sins. There are several other places where sins are listed. I'm just giving a highlight of the sin. He said, you're telling me I can't do this and I can't do that and I've got to be careful how I say this and I'm to be thankful for that? Absolutely, because God knows what's best. God says, I'll tell you. And see, here's where we get a little, our American, you're going to tell me what? I'm going to tell you what's best for you, and you got to trust me with that. We have this attitude that we want to figure it out on our own. We want to find out. I know that was bad. We're like that small child who's told, it was really cool with Nora. I didn't ask Hillary this question, but she got her one of these neat little new stoves that she was playing with. Well, there's a little button up there, and you can turn the stove on. And it's just dawned on me last night. I'm sitting there playing with Nora. When I turn that stove on, little light, one touch turns it on, the next touch gets it brighter. The first thing she did, y'all are ahead of me, went right up and touched that light. I'm going, no! And y'all are going, well, but that's not going to hurt her. See, here's where God's way ahead of us. Satan's glitz. He makes it look like God's holding out on us when the whole time God's got our back. And when he says don't, it's not because he doesn't want us to have a good experience. It's because he doesn't want us to have a horrible experience we're going to have as a result of doing something the wrong way. And he knows that. And there is a gratitude. How many of us, and it's probably happened to me just because I'm older, are now so grateful that my father was the disciplinarian that he was? I don't want to even conceive. And in fact, I'm pretty convinced I wouldn't be standing in front of you today had I not had that type of discipline in my life. I'm pretty sure I'd have done something even more stupid. Sorry about using the word stupid. That's just what it would have been. Because God cares at a level. And then when he's when he's talking further in the text, after he refers there in Ephesians 5, he then says, let no one deceive you with empty words, because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. I'm ahead of myself. Verse 5, for this you know that no fornicator, unclean person, covetous man, idolater, which is any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ, let no one deceive you with empty words. There are arguments that we must acknowledge. You know, people try to make an argument for whatever they want to do. Have you ever heard somebody reason themselves into doing something wrong? And whatever great ornate situation, but here it's like this, and you know, and that's the ultimate thought process of if I'm somewhere else where nobody knows me, then maybe I can do things because nobody's going to know. That's the beginning of the phrase, what happens in such and such stays in such and such. But that's where God once again steps in and says, I know all. And don't listen to someone coming to you giving you some reasoning, because Satan walked into the middle of the garden and Adam and Eve were forever distanced from the tree of life because he made them for a moment start going, did God say? He made them have that thought process of maybe God hasn't revealed the whole truth. Maybe God didn't tell me everything. Maybe God doesn't know it all. Never believe that lie. God does know everything. And it's that, see 1 John 2, a couple of texts. 1 John 2:6. He who says he abides in him ought himself also to walk just as he walked. We need to have that relationship that I'm ahead of myself. 1 John 3 is where I wanted to read. I knew that didn't get what the thought I was. 3 verse 6, whoever abides in him does not sin. Whoever sins has neither seen him or known him. Little children, let no one deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous just as he is righteous. He who sins is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of Man was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whoever has been born of God does not sin, for his seed remains in him, and he cannot sin because he has been born of God. Now that text is, when you read that, you go, what do you mean? It says I can't sin. What's he saying? The text has this whole concept of if I'm with God, if I've been born into his family, I'm a son of his or I'm a daughter of his, I don't want to sin. My attitude is when I want to please God, I want to do what is right. Now there's a fuller sense in that in 1 John 1. If we walk in the light as he is in the light, if I'm trying to please God, his blood continues to cleanse me. But it doesn't work the way Paul warned the individuals in Rome. They said, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? I've heard individuals say, well, that means that God he'll forgive me no matter what I do. Watch it. He will, but our attitude has got to be incredible. Our attitude has got to be when I sin that it so overwhelms me and guilts me that I know I've disappointed my Father. Hebrews 12, 5 through 12. So Christ did not glorify himself to become high priest. Verse 7 says, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with vehement cries and tears to him, was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his godly fear. Though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. That's our whole process of life. And the arguments that we hear about, but I know God said this, but anytime you hear a person use that type of terminology, and they use the phrase but or may, after saying God said this, but, because what they're trying to do is rationalize what they're doing. God said this, that's sufficient about whether it's wrong or right. And that ends that particular argument. And then he ends in the context, go back to Ephesians 5. when he says, these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not be partakers of them. For you were once darkness, but now are as light. Walk as children of light. There is an authority we must accept. If there is one point that the world desperately needs to hear and understand, it's that God is right. And He has the right to tell me so. We have become so independent and so selfish that we literally think we can do this on our own. We don't need any outside help. Well, may God forgive us for that arrogance. 1 John 2, I mentioned already. Turn to John 15. There's a statement in here that is incredibly daunting, but it's Jesus as He shares about the relationship that we have with Him and with each other. And in chapter 15, I'm just going to read it. It's the entire 3 chapters where He's talking about His relationship with His Father, our relationship with Him. And He says, abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do anything. Y'all look at me like I can't read. Jesus said, separate from me, you're going to be successful. Nope. He said, you can do Nothing. I don't care how you figure that up mathematically, it's zilch, zero, nada. He says, without me, whatever you do, if it's without me, it's worthless. And He has the right, because He's God. And the sooner, not just we as His people, but the world realizes that they're not in control and only God is. You see, I got a better phrase. When in Rome, or when you add your list, do as God approves. That way, you don't have to worry about the information going anywhere else, or about something being found out via Instagram, Snapchat, or Facebook. Because anymore that'll happen, all of a sudden you'll see something pop up. What was that? Within 5 minutes yesterday, countless numbers of individuals knew that my family and I were at Mountain Island because a friend of mine posted a picture of us being at Mountain Island on the lake. You know, in just an instant, your life, you can post something or show some picture that shows somebody some activity that you're involved in. And I love what my grandmother, she'd say, is that a picture you want your mama to see? Ooh. Let me throw one a little bit. Is that a picture you want God to see? What are you saying? He's already seen it. What happens, God already knows. Be careful who you spend your time with. As he closes that thought, and maybe it segues into the next, he says, you used to walk like this, but now you're children of light. So if I claim to be a child of light, then I've got to be very careful. I've got to be very careful that my choices, both in my actions and the individuals. Now somebody's going to come in and wait a minute, how am I ever going to influence someone if they're struggling and they have all kinds of issues going on? There are positive ways and encouraging ways that I can still be a friend of the world and a friend of sinners like Jesus was, and not place myself in a detrimental location. I've got to be careful because I know me. You know you. So that's one of the benefits sometimes of knowing our own weaknesses and being very honest with ourselves. And Paul is striving to tell the Ephesians, you know what you're supposed to do. Be careful where you place yourself or what situation you put yourself into because you're weak. God will. See, what happens wherever, God knows. My hope and prayer, my thought for this is just to make sure we listen very carefully to the God who loves us enough to warn us. And His warnings are based in the greatest wisdom and the most powerful love that any of us will ever experience. So listen to the one who genuinely loves you. This morning, if there's any way we can be of assistance. There may be someone this morning wanting to become a member of the family of God. There may be someone wanting to make confession of Jesus as Lord, penitent faith and baptism. There may be someone who's struggling with something and you said, I've tried to deal with this on my own. Maybe if I share it with my brothers and sisters, they can pray about it for me and they'll be aware of it and may know of an alternative path or answer. That's why we have this moment. That's why we have this song as we stand and as we sing.